Alright, here we go. This is what I'll be starting out with, and I've got a few changes that I'll show you as well. Start out with dealing with the pack. I've had this pack for almost 2 years now, and it is, of course, the Z-Pack's Arc Blast. You've already seen, I'm sure, plenty of reviews of the Arc Blast, but it has just been fabulous. I've used it in hot weather, cold weather, loaded with about 35 pounds and down to 20 pounds. It's always comfortable, always been just terrific. It is, it's waterproof, but I found that I really like having a pack cover for it, so I'll bring that up just a little bit later. I've tricked this out with just about everything that they can get you. I've got, notice here, I've got one hip pouch. I've actually got the other hip pouch, but I'm going to use that on one of my shoulder straps. The other shoulder strap will take my water bladder, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. I've also got the side bags right here, and that's added some outside capacity for the pack, and that helps a lot. I'm using a little net pouch that I put on there that I had. That's always helpful. I usually just carry stuff in general in that thing. So it's really a good pack. Now, I got it at Lynn when it was a little bit less expensive, but really worth the money. Super light, 20. I think with all the stuff that I've got on it, it's about 24, 25 ounces. So just over 1.5 pounds. So you can't really go too wrong with it in terms of utility. Great pack. Okay, sleep system. Start down here. I'm using the Xped Sin Mat Winter Light sleeping pad. That's the red pad down here, and it's the regular length, wide width. I absolutely love this pad. It's like having a Sealy Posturepedic on the trail, and so far it's just been absolutely fabulous. Now, I have heard that it is too warm during the summer. I have used it in up to about 70 degrees, and it's been just fine. So I'm going to try to continue to use it all through the summer. It's just a hair heavier than my lightest. Well, actually, it's quite a bit heavier than my lightest sleeping pad, but it comes in at about 18 ounces, and it's worth every ounce as far as I'm concerned. Now, this right here, the camo thing, is actually an emergency space blanket. I carry that for at least this first month because there's always a possibility of it getting just seriously cold. When my sister made an attempt of the AT in 13, she experienced sub-zero temperatures, so I want to make sure on that. So taking the emergency space blanket to hopefully help. The yellow right here is the, I think it's called a snoozle or something like that. It's a pump bag to use to fill the sleeping pad, and that makes it a lot easier. You don't have any breath in the sleeping pad, so you don't get any moisture in there. The other nice thing about it, let's see if I can, well, I'll just tell you, it is also a large dry bag, and I use that for my pack liner, so it does double duty in that case. Now, the green right here is the Sea to Summit Cool Max bag liner. I've tried a couple of different bag liners. I like this one because it's a jersey material and it's stretchy, so it will be pretty comfortable no matter how you got your sleeping quilt set up, and I am using a quilt as opposed to a sleeping bag. Next to that is this is just, well, basically it's a pillowcase. I took an old cotton pillowcase, sewed it up smaller, and what I do is I just stuff my puffy into that for a pillow. I've tried a lot of different options. I've tried the air pillows. I've tried just using my down jacket, and this works far and away the best for me. You know, it's a very old pillowcase, so it's nice and soft. It holds in the down jacket so it doesn't just dissipate during the middle of the night, and works out really, really well for me. So made that. It's about an ounce, and it's definitely worth it for me. Now up here is my sleeping quilt, the Enlightened Equipment sleeping quilt. It's a 0-degree quilt. I sleep very cold, and because I'll be going into the Smokies on March 1st, I want to make absolutely sure that I can get a good night's sleep, and this thing is absolutely fabulous. It's also great because even at 0 degrees, it is comes in at 23.5 ounces. And because it's a quilt, you can always open it up if it's too warm, and that way you can control how warm you are at night. I've had it down to 23 with absolutely no issue. Been plenty warm. The only difference that I'm going to be doing is, excuse me, besides the liner, I'm going to be carrying some sort of vapor barrier. So when it gets below 30, I'll have the vapor barrier over the top of my liner. I did notice that it was taking on a little bit of moisture, and it was reducing the insulation capability, but that may just be the way I was dealing with it. But the vapor barrier, I think, should take care of that. And because it's a quilt, it doesn't have a hood, so I have the Z-Pax Goose Down hood. This is terrific because I've also used it in the mornings when it's real cold. I'll just throw it on when I start hiking, and because it's so light and easy to deal with, I can just whip it off and stuff it in a pocket. So it helps warm me up in the morning. Now, this has been for the start of the hike. Now, as soon as it gets a little bit warmer, I also have a 20-degree sleeping bag that I'll switch to probably about the end of the first 3 weeks or a month, and hold on to that for about a month. And at the end of about a month and a half or 2, I'll switch to a summer bag, which is this one right here. This is a summer sleeping quilt that I made. It's about 12 ounces. It's just Climashield Apex, and it's real comfortable. It's probably good down to about 50 degrees, and then with the liner, which I'll hang on to for the whole trip, should take me down pretty comfortably to probably 40 degrees, and I can always throw on some base layer as well as that. Okay, so that's pack and sleep system. And now to tent. Alrighty, change in lighting and a few other odds and ends. Now on to shelter. I have 2 tents here. Now the one in red, this is a Sea to Summit dry bag. I usually keep my tent outside my pack in a dry bag, even if it's wet. It keeps things a little bit more controllable. This is a Z-Pax Duplex. I'm sure you've probably familiar with them. Heard a lot of good things about them, and I will agree with all of it. It's not perfect, but it is an absolutely fabulous tent. Now, one thing that I will say, I was using this green one, which is 6 Moon Designs Lunar Solo. That also is a terrific tent. But I had convinced myself that I had to drop every single ounce or I wasn't going to be able to do this. In retrospect, I would not have bought the Duplex. Not because it's not a fabulous tent, but because it's a very expensive tent and I really couldn't afford it. I just convinced myself of it. The duplex is super light at 21 ounces minus stakes. It is extremely easy to set up, and it's got a fair amount of room in it. The thing that I really do like about both these tents is they are side entrance, and I don't think that I would ever go to a head entrance again on a tent. The reason that I still like the Lunar Pro, or Lunar Solo, excuse me, is that even though it is technically a solo tent, they claim it's a 1.5, and to be honest, I didn't really feel like it had all that much less space to work with for a single person than the duplex. You know, it's got a real nice amount of side space, and it's pretty easy to set up. Probably the negatives about it compared to the duplex are that it's sill nylon. I would love to see them make one out of a sill poly because it wouldn't stretch as much. But it is only 3 ounces heavier, and it is less than half the cost. And that's the thing. I think if you have not already got your tent, or if you're you're not happy with the one you've got, I really recommend you look into the Six Moon Design Lunar Solo. It's I think even if you have it factory sealed, which I would highly recommend, even with it factory sealed, it's around 2.5 to 60 or so. So it's just a really good deal, and I really enjoyed it. The other thing that I would really recommend for it, if you do get one, is what I did was mixed up some silicone and mineral spirits, and painted the bottom on the outside and painted the bottom on the inside. Now that was a little bit overkill, but it really made it so you don't slip around on the inside, and it toughened up the bottom. So for the week I used it on the trail, the week I used it on the trail, I'll get the little bigger, longer view here, I didn't use a ground cloth. Now I've started to use a polycro ground cloth on both my tents, on the duplex as well, just to keep the dirt off the bottom so that it packs up a little nicer. But again, the duplex is terrific. The Lunar Solo is fabulous, especially for the money. So either one's a good deal, and if you're on a tight budget, I really highly recommend you look at the Lunar Solo. Along with that, down here there are the stakes. Neither one comes with, actually the duplex doesn't come with stakes. The Lunar Solo does, I think. It's been a while. But either way, that's added. Off the bat, the duplex is 21 ounces. The Lunar Solo is 24. And then add stakes. We'll add about 2 ounces or so if you use the titanium stakes. And I've also got some screw eyes that I use to tie the tent down if I've got a platform. That makes it a little easier to deal with. I've seen Big Bird's video of him doing the duplex with the freestanding option. I would not go with that route. I've had no problem, really, no real problem dealing with the tents the way it is this way. So those are my tents. Either one's a good choice, and obviously there's lots of other good tents. Now, either way, I'm taking a tent for at least the first month, probably the first 2 months. After that, I'm considering switching to a hammock. If I do that, back here on my hammock system, this is all DIY stuff. I made the hammock and tarp and suspension system myself. The hammock with continuous loops is a single layer, 1 ounce, what is it, Robic fabric. Really nice stuff. It'll handle about 225 pounds, and that weighs a little over 7.5 ounces. The tarp is a 12-foot hex tarp. I'm using a sill poly fabric of 1 ounce, and as a 12-foot tarp, that is about 10 ounces, about 10 and a half ounces. The suspension system is about 4 ounces, 5 ounces if you include the ridge line on the tarp. And altogether, it's a pretty nice setup for just about the same weight as the tent. The tent's a little warmer, so I'd use that in cold weather. The hammock's a fair amount cooler, so I'll use that for the summer. I'll also use my sleeping pad, the X-Pad sleeping pad in the hammock. If that turns out to be too warm, over here is a foam pad that I'll switch to. So those are my options for shelter. After shelter, we've got cook system. All right, cooking. This is my cook set. I'm going with a canister stove. I usually carry the small canister. I've been carrying one, but I think for this trip I'm mostly going to be carrying 2 small ones. And I actually have a reason for that, but I'll tell you about that a little bit later, or if you have a question. If I get my dog to move out of the way, we'll be fine here. Come on, go on. Anyway, canister stove. I've tried alcohol, I've tried Asbet, a few other odds and ends. The canister stove seems to be the most usable for me. I do plan on cooking for the whole trip. We'll see how that works out. I'm using, right here, is the Fire Maple 116T. And that is about 1.75 ounces. I've had the, I think it was BRS titanium stove at 0.9 ounces. That's a good stove. I like this one more because it's quieter, because it has a larger flame and less, it's easier to not burn something. You know, it gets more even heat. Along with that, of course, is the Cozy, made out of, I think that one was made out of a windscreen insulation. And under here is a piece of polycro. Now I use polycro when I cook because I think that what we're doing as a group, and I'm glad to see a lot of people are talking more and more about Leave No Trace. But when we cook, we end up dropping crumbs and stuff, and that brings mice and other critters in. And I think if we're more careful about food residue, I think we can reduce the amount of mice and wildlife in our shelters and bothering us. Up here is cutlery. I'm using the Sea to Summit aluminum long spoon, fork, and knife. Yes, most people will tell you that you only need one. I use all 3, and I'm real happy about it. This is Sea to Summit makes this out of 7075 aircraft aluminum, and they are super light. I don't really worry about any extra weight for these, and they are very helpful. I love the long spoon for cooking, and the knife is handy for making lunches. Over in the middle of the screen is a silicone spatula. I like that a lot for after I've cooked. I can use that to sort of clean up the pot, and that makes cleaning a little better. This will take all the food residue out, and then just a little bit of water, and get the pot pretty clean. Right here, this is the only seasoning I usually carry. Sometimes I'll carry some mayo packets or something like that. This is actually a pepper grinder. A little extravagant, but I love fresh pepper, and most food is got enough salt and other seasonings in it, so the fresh pepper is all I really need. For a mug, I'm using a GSI. It is plastic with a neoprene insulation on it. Been using it for several years. Really like it. I don't like the metal mugs. This is insulated, and it is a little bit more comfortable on your lips when you're drinking something hot, and it's got a lid on it. For a pot, I have the Snow Peak 1.4 with, I guess you'd call it a frying pad lid. again, a little over the top, but I found that I was using a Tokes 0.9 liter, and it just wasn't big enough. I was spilling stuff, and this gives me more room to cook, as well as you do a little bit more with it. We'll see how that works out. It added about 3 or 4 ounces, but I'm mostly pretty comfortable with that as well. Beyond that, my bear bag, I used to use the Z-Packs bear bag kit. I found that the bag itself was a little too small, and the cord that they give you is too small in diameter, and it hurts your hands quite a bit. So what I've done is I still use the little tiny throw bag to put rocks in, but the Sea to Summit dry bag is larger. Inside that, I use the Lock Sack odor-proof bags, and I can't tell you that really works a lot, but I've never had any bears come after my stuff, so I'm going to stick with that, see how that works out. This cord is a little larger diameter, it's a little easier to deal with, plus it's reflective. So in the middle of the night, if you need to find your cord, or if you're walking to the loo and you don't want to run into something, if you're using your headlamp, it looks like a string of lights. It's really pretty handy, so I like that a lot. All in all, fairly compact cook set, but real usable for a lot of different stuff. So on to water. As always, or almost always, the Sawyer squeeze, the large one, very handy. For the dirty water bag, I'm using a 2-liter Platypus. I've had this one forever. I think when these first came out, I got this one, so I've had it for at least 20 years, and it's still holding up pretty good, so I'm switching to that. My Sawyer was already breaking down, so going with that. And that's also going to be used if I need to carry extra water. I'll just carry it as dirty water, or technically dirty water. I was using a large smart water bottle up front, and while it was fine, I really liked the utility of a bladder. I had always used a bladder, but I'd kept it a 2-liter bladder in the side pouch of my pack. Made the pack sort of lopsided and heavier. I've moved most of the water forward onto my front straps, and that's helpful. And this gets strapped to my shoulder strap upside down and makes it a lot easier. I like the utility of the bladder, and having it up front makes it so that you can really tell how much water you've got. And then, as well as that, I'll carry the small smart water bottle, and that's mostly for electrolytes and maybe a little extra water if I really need to. And that pretty much rounds out all of it. Now this is sort of the utilitarian stuff, so I've got my pack, my sleep system, my shelter system, cook system, and water. So with that, I will stop here and do the next batch, which will be just about everything else, comfort stuff, clothes, and everything else. So I will talk to you in a little bit. Hawk out.